our introductions. So I can start by introducing myself and then love to hear from you guys with what you or how you heard about this and why you're interested. So I'm Lisa. I am the Aquatic Scientist at CRWA, and I work on all of our water quality monitoring programs, including Cyanobacteria.
Hi everyone, my name is Iris. I'm the Rita Barron Fellow, CRWA. I help run the Volunteer Monthly Monitor Program and the benthic monitoring program also. Yeah, I'll be around for next year or so.
Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Great. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I'm actually working part-time with CRWA. I am, helping out in preparation for the gala, and I'm from Newton, and I just graduated college, and really my passion is for climate resilience. So I really love CRWA's work because my interest is like, how do we mitigate and like adapt to climate change, especially vulnerable coastal cities like Boston. So yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Nicole and Yishan, would you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi. I'm sorry. So I'm Nicole Voss. I'm an architect, and so professionally, I'm really interested in resilience, and just generally very excited to be here.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Hey, this is Ishan. I'm just going to keep my cameras on for now. I work as an environmental policy analyst. Actually have a background in aquatic ecosystem science.
Oh, awesome.
I just moved to the Boston area not too long ago, and I'm excited to learn about the local waterways. Yeah, and I actually used to, I think my last job was related to harmful algal bloom response. So excited to see how I can contribute to this citizen science monitoring program. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. That's great. So I think we'll go ahead and get started then. And if anyone else joins, we'll just have them join on in. I'm going to share my screen. Nicole, hopefully you'll be able to see that. If not, hopefully you can just listen.
I can see, thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, can everybody see this? I think so.
Yes, good, thank you.
Okay. All right, Iris, take it away.
All right. So we're going to be here talking today about our Cyanobacteria visual monitoring program. Next slide. All right, so for those of you who might not know, CRWA's mission is to protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and its watershed through science, advocacy, and law. So we were founded in 1965 by a group of concerned citizens who saw the pollution that was running off into the Charles and wanted to do something about it. We're one of the oldest watershed associations in the country, and we work closely with different organizations like the EPA and state agencies and various municipalities in trying to keep Charles River clean. A lot of our staff works in around 4 different program areas. We have river science, the Blue Cities Initiative, climate change adaptation, law, advocacy, and policy. Next slide, please. So this is a new program that we're going to try to start up. It's a volunteer program that's going to help develop, track the development of cyanobacteria blooms in the Charles River and its watershed. Volunteers are going to be making visual assessments through an app, Survey123, which we'll go into a little bit later. And what we're asking you to do is to look around the Charles River and other water bodies to determine if there's cyanobacteria in the waters and to what extent. These results will be shared with Massachusetts Department of Public Health and our local boards of health in the area, and they'll help them determine whether or not they need to set out a bloom advisory. Next slide, please. So what exactly is cyanobacteria? Cyanobacteria, also called blue-green algae, but it's not algae, are microscopic organisms that naturally grow in rivers, lakes, and ponds. When there's a lot of warm water and excess nutrients, the cyanobacteria can explode in population, and this creates what we call a bloom. Next, please. So here at CRWA, we do monitor cyanobacteria assay water quality samples. So every week, every Wednesday, we go out and we will visit 3 sites, Broad Canal, Kendall Square, the Museum of Science, and community boating, which is in the Esplanade area. And we will collect water samples and take some photos through the same form that you'll be looking at on survey 1 through 3. And we'll let DPH know whether or not we think that a bloom is starting. Typically, if we do think a bloom's about to start, DPH might decide to send someone out for a visual assessment also, and then also conduct any tests that they feel necessary. A bloom is declared if a cell count is greater than 70,000 cells per milliliter, or if the toxins are greater than 14 parts per billion. Next slide, please. So one major concern with cyanobacteria is how it affects the health of us, but also animals and ecosystems. These blooms can have negative health effects if they produce toxins, become too dense, use up the oxygen in the water, or release harmful gases. Possible ways that we can be exposed to cyanobacteria blooms are through ingestion, so like swallowing any contaminated water or eating seafood contaminated with toxins. This can cause things like gastrointestinal issues. Through inhalation, so breathing in any aerosolized toxins, which can cause like sore throat or pneumonia, or obviously skin contact, so direct contact with the contaminated water while swimming or boating. And usually this can come in the form of different kinds of skin rashes. In addition to all these health effects to us humans, they actually cause some dog deaths every year, which is really sad. But obviously, if you don't know there's a bloom in a pond and your dog goes swimming and drinks from it can be pretty dangerous. Next, please. And so it's because of these health risks that CRWA incorporates cyanobacteria monitoring into our flagging program. The goal of this program is to inform river users when the river is 100% safe for boating and when precautions might be necessary. So usually a blue flag will signify that it's safe boating conditions, and a red flag is unsafe boating conditions. So we have real-time water quality forecasts that we based off this water quality model. In addition to cyanobacteria monitoring, we also make sure to look at the CSOs, which is the combined sewage overflows. So usually these happens during heavy rainfall. And then every week, just like cyanobacteria, we go out and we'll collect samples to make sure that our water quality models predictions are correct. And then we will release any public notification, usually through email or Twitter, letting you know the status of the river at the time. And although we say it's for boaters, what we really mean is mainly for rowers, because they're closer to the water and have a higher chance of making contact with any contamination. Right, so why is it important to monitor? Here in the lower basin of the Charles River, we experience annual cyanobacteria blooms that last for 2 weeks or more. Although, however, this year, luckily, we have not had a bloom yet, and it's probably due to heavy rainfall that we experienced this summer. So we have seen beginnings of blooms, but usually the rain washes out by the time DPH goes to do a visual assessment. The blooms are becoming more frequent and prolonged with the climate change. Which makes sense because the populations do explode with warmer water, and we are experiencing increasing temperatures. So as I mentioned before, CRWA coordinates with Masters DPH to track any blooms that we see. And these blooms, because they can change locations and intensities very quickly, we want this volunteer program to help us have more eyes on the river and keep track of any potential blooms so that we can make any necessary health advisories. I mean DPH. All right, so this is just a graph showing cyanobacteria blooms from 2006 to 2020, so the years on the y-axis and the dates are on the x. In 2020, which is the top one, we actually had, in the lower basin, we had 2 blooms. One that started June 25th and ended in July 27th. And then we had a second one second bloom that lasted from August 3rd until, I believe, December. So very long. And I believe, Lisa, I forget, you remind me, why do we think this bloom was so intense?
Last summer we had a pretty significant drought. So it was kind of the opposite of this summer. We didn't have rainfall and we had very, very warm, extensive hot periods. So what we think happened is this bloom just kind of went crazy with the amount of heat that we had. And then there were no rainstorms to like wash out the cells, which is usually what we see happen.
Great. And next.
So since we're having some trouble with the chat, we're gonna send you guys the volunteer waiver that you can sign or that you can fill out before you guys go out and sample after. But I just wanted to take a moment to ask if anybody has questions about cyanobacteria at this point, anything Iris has talked about.
I think my only question is that I see that this is recording. Will we have access to the video after?
Yeah, we can send out the video after as well.
That would be great. Just in case I forgot something, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, of course. And we'll send out the slides as well. Awesome. Or Ishan, it sounds like you have some expertise in cyanobacteria. So anything else you want to add about them as well?
No, thank you. I think this is a really good presentation. I also have to maybe sign off pretty soon. I have a call, but I'll come back afterwards and I'll just keep the slides open. Thank you.
Okay, great. So for the next part of this, we're going to have you guys, we're going to work through our survey that we use and have you kind of do an example one on your phone. It sounds like maybe that won't be as possible, Nicole, since you're on the train, and Yishan, since you're going to a different call. So I'll just go through kind of what our survey looks like, and then you guys can download the app afterwards and start observing. So getting started, we'll send this to you again, and there's a link to the volunteer waiver there. So that's just a simple waiver that says you're volunteering with CRWA. And then the only materials that you would need are your phone, and there's an app that you can download. We'll show you how. And then what's helpful is like a clear jar. So taking kind of a scoop full of water in the jar and having it really close up to see is pretty helpful sometimes in seeing the actual cyanobacteria cells if they're there. But it's not necessary if you are like running along the esplanade and you just are like, oh, I'm gonna stop, take a break on the dock and like take a few photos through the app. That's perfect too. So where and when to submit observations, what we're really looking for is, as Iris mentioned, these blooms in the lower basin of the Charles, which is like in the Boston and Cambridge area. They really move around quickly and change with weather very quickly. So we're really looking for observations in the lower basin area. So that could be, all around kind of Boston and Cambridge, wherever you happen to be. And then we do get blooms sometimes in the Charles River Lakes District, which is kind of it's a pretty popular recreation area in the Waltham, Weston, and Newton areas. And so some people like to kayak there and paddleboard there, and having observations there is helpful as well. But where you want to be is making observations where you can closely examine the water. So that's like a dock, or maybe a street that's not too far from the water, but you want to be kind of within touching distance of the water. And you're free to use this method to determine if you are looking at a cyanobacteria bloom, and then if you suspect a bloom is present, then you can contact the local board of health. That is always a good thing to do. We will also be checking in on any observations that come through every day, so we can see your observations as they get submitted. And then how often, we're really just looking for people to do this kind of with what works with your schedule. So again, since weather changes the blooms a lot, daily to weekly observations are really helpful. Since we sample on Wednesdays, sampling or viewing, making these visual assessments on the weekends is really helpful for us as well. And you are free to make multiple observations in a single day at multiple sites. Also, if you happen to be, running across the bridge or something like that, you can definitely stop and make an observation on different sides of the bridge. That is always helpful too, because conditions do change from location to location. And yeah, we kind of designed this to be able to incorporate into your normal routine. So we do have a lot of boathouse partners too. So we've introduced this to them and they, are on the river all the time. If you are out kayaking, or even if you just walk or run along the river, that's a great place to take a few minutes and take an observation. So the first step to this is downloading the Survey123 app. You can find this in just the Apple or Google Play stores. It's an ArcGIS app, so it goes to our Geographic Information Systems account, and it's all linked up through there. So when you go there, and you guys can do this along with me now or later, you can open the app and give it permissions to use your device location and take photos, because those will be part of this, this app. And then you do have to sign in. And so these are the credentials that you can use to sign in order to download the survey. So the username is Clean Charles and the password is CleanCharles7. And everybody can log in through those ones. Those are kind of our generic volunteer logins. And then you click on the upper right-hand corner, say download surveys, and select the Cyanobacteria Visual Monitoring Program survey. Your phone will take a few minutes to download that. Always good to do kind of on Wi-Fi when you're there. And then when you want to do the assessment, next time you do the assessment, you won't have to go through all these steps. You'll just click on the app, it will open, and then you can click on the survey and say collect. If you want, you don't have to do this on your phone. You can do it through a website link as well. And I'll show you what that looks like here. There's kind of a little guide, and then we'll go through all of this information to put in together. So to begin a survey, enter your first and last name. I should present this. And then select your experience if you're trained or untrained. If you've been through this, this training tonight, then you can select trained. Your affiliation, so there are different options. You can select CRWA volunteer, and then the date and time of your observation. So this will default to the date and time that's on your cell phone, but just make sure that it's correct. And then the first question that it has you answer is classifying the water surface based on how windy it is. And this is important because wind can also be another thing that drives cyanobacteria blooms like to a certain location, or can wash or kind of wash them towards a certain location, or wash them out of the water body altogether. So calm, this is an example of a calm water body. It would be basically you can see a reflection. Rolling would be, there's some surface ripples. And then white caps is when it's like very windy and you actually get those little white caps at the top of the waves. Likely you won't have cyanobacteria blooms in white caps. I've never seen it, but it could potentially happen. And then you will select your site. So we have a bunch of sites listed that come down. So I'm actually gonna go to the survey for this part. So here's all the things. So the sites that we have that are ones that we normally go to, this would be Broad Canal in Cambridge, the Museum of Science, the BU Bridge, the MIT Sailing Pavilion, CRI is Community Rowing in Brighton, Community Boating, which is along the Esplanade, Northeastern Sailing, the new Charles River Dam at the locks, the Lakes District in general, that's over in Waltham. Magazine Beach is a nice park in Cambridge, and North Point Park is also in Cambridge. You can also select other and then type in where you are. You can say like Esplanade Lagoons. So let's say that. And then you'll have a location here, and it should default to your current location if you have your location settings adjusted, but you can always change this too. So you can zoom in. Oops. You can zoom in all the way to where you are. Say you're on the Esplanade Lagoons. Oops, oh no, I zoomed in too much. Oh no, I'm back in Africa. Anyways, you guys get the idea, but you can click and move where you are. So we really want an exact location when you're doing this. So when you're all along the Esplanade, that's a pretty wide area. That's like this whole area here. So if you're like near this Esplanade Lagoon, I want you to put that exact location. If you're like on this dock, then put that dock as the location. So as specific as you can be is helpful. If you're in the middle of the river rowing or something, it's helpful to see where that is as well, because you can have higher cyanobacteria concentrations like closer to the shore than in the middle. So that's helpful as well. Okay. At this point, if you do have a jar with you, then it's a good time to take a scoopful of water with a glove on, especially if you think that there is cyanobacteria, you want to be using protective gloves. And then just set that down on the side and try to let it settle for a few minutes. And then you'll be starting to answer some questions. So the first question that you answer is the water clear? And the water would be clear if you can see down about 2 feet in depth. So here are some examples of true for clear water. We pretty much never have this clarity of water in the Charles. There's usually more sediment in it. But if you can see like rocks below, even if it's a little hazy, like rocks at the bottom, then that's pretty clear. And then false examples would be if you see cyanobacteria, which this is, or any other kind of thing like really a lot of sediment or pollen on the surface, that would be false. And when in doubt, you can select false. Then the next question it's going to ask you if you select false is there cyanobacteria in the water? And then you're going to have to put true or false for that. So this is going to be the trickiest part of everything, is identifying what's cyanobacteria in the water and what's not cyanobacteria in the water. So here are some examples of things that might look like cyanobacteria, but aren't. So pollen, especially when we have, hay season and we've got a lot of pollen coming off the trees, we get these really thick mats on the surface of water, and they kind of, they look like they could be cyanobacteria, but usually they're not as green, and they're really just floating on the surface. So one thing you can do is take a stick or something else and kind of just disturb the water surface and see if it moves around. And if it does, it might be pollen. Duckweed is another thing that could look like cyanobacteria. This is actually a tiny flowering plant that floats on the surface of the water, and it can grow in pretty like thick in areas, but it's really just on the surface. And when you pick it up with your hands, you'll be able to see like distinct little leaves. So that is really too big to be like cyanobacteria. And then another thing that we often get is called filamentous algae. And this is it's a type of algae that grows on the surface of the water, but it has like strings that stick together. And so a good test to see if it's cyanobacteria or not is to take a stick and see if you can kind of pick it up with a stick. And if you can, then that's probably filamentous algae and not cyanobacteria.
While we're on this slide, can I ask, is there a seasonality to any of these?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically well, pollen will be mostly in like the spring, early summer. And then the duckweed and filamentous algae generally get more thick throughout the summertime period. Does that help?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, now if you think there is cyano, these are some different ways that it can look. And I've tried to include a bunch of different pictures because it can look a few different ways when you're in the water or at the cyanobacteria bloom. So one way it can look is kind of like these little grass clippings. And sometimes those can form like little paint splotches on the surface of the water. That's what you're looking at here is a picture down at the surface of the water. Sometimes it can be kind of like a green haze, like if you look out over the water, but then when you look directly at it, you can kind of see like little green specks. And then this is another view inside of a jar. This is a little harder to see from here, but you can see these like little grass clipping looking things. And that's a specific species of cyanobacteria that we do often get in the Charles. Okay, so those are some pictures. I'll show you other pictures along that are, yes, this is cyanobacteria, so you can kind of get an idea because this is the hardest part of this. But if you select in your survey that there is cyanobacteria in the water, then it's going to ask you what's the extent of the cyanobacteria. So it just asks for, is it isolated or is it a large extent? So isolated would mean that you can kind of see where the end of it is. In this picture, you can see that it's kind of blown over by wind onto the pond. But over here, where my mouse is, you cannot really see it as well. And so that would be an isolated area. And a large extent would be, this is actually a photo from the Esplanade from a couple of years ago. This is cyanobacteria. Both of these are cyanobacteria. Would be if you can't see like the end of kind of the greenish tint of the water. That would be a large extent. These are also both cyanobacteria and what have both been on the Charles River. So it can look like a few different things. And so the next question, if it is cyanobacteria, is what does it look like in the water body? And some of the common kind of things are paint splotches. You can see here, this is a zoom out of this. So this is what it looks like when you're looking directly down on the water body and you have these kind of like little splotches. And then it might look like this kind of from a larger extent. This is along the Esplanade from 2 years ago. Another way it can look is like pea soup. And that's like if there's really a thick kind of mat of it on the surface of the water like this. And this, I would be careful. This, you would probably want to test, hey, is this filamentous algae or not? And you can use that stick test. And if you put a stick into here, that cyanobacteria wouldn't come up onto your stick. It wouldn't clump together. It would kind of distribute when you disturb the water surface. Other potentials that you could use for the descriptions are like a green haze. This is at the Museum of Science last year. And then grass clippings is kind of the other one. So this is the same species of cyanobacteria as this is, but sometimes it doesn't get as clumpy. So it just really looks like grass clippings in the water. And then if you do have water in your jar, it will ask you, what does it look like in your jar? And usually you're just going to see grass clippings or dots and specks. So these are a little bit harder to see, but I think you can see here the little clips. And then here you can see really the individual cyanobacteria cells are these little dots and specks that are floating around. And another thing that is helpful to know if you're using the jar, if you take a sample in your jar and leave the jar for about 2 or 3 minutes, generally cyanobacteria will float to the top. And anything else like sediment in the water or other types of algae will generally sink to the bottom. So that's another useful way to see, okay, is it cyanobacteria? Is it floating to the top? And then the app will ask you to take photos in four different ways. So one way is a landscape view. So this would be a landscape view where you're really looking over and can see some of like the context around it, like the side of the river or a dock that you're standing on, so that it can kind of give you orient you to the size of the extent that you're looking at, basically. You can do one straight down into the water body. If you get like some of the dock on the side, that's totally fine, but just what does it look like on the surface? And then the jar, you can take a picture of the side of the jar and straight down in the jar. Those are both useful as well, but you don't have to use the jar. And then you can submit any additional pictures as well. That is also in the survey. And then there's an open text box at the end for you to enter any notes that you have into. So I always like to have notes, no matter kind of what they are. It's helpful to have like a first person account of what you're kind of thinking and observing while you are doing the visual assessment. So some things to consider is, if you've done this site before, how has the site changed from last time that you made your observation? How confident are you in determining if what you see is cyanobacteria? That's really helpful because we can take a look at the pictures and if you're not sure, you know, we can confirm or deny that. Are there other plants growing around in the water? That's sometimes helpful to know, because sometimes like little pieces of the plants can look like cyanobacteria. And then what's the weather been like recently? That's also really helpful to know if it's rained yesterday. That could affect if there's more cyano or less cyano, or it can also affect if there's other stuff in the water. If it's rained, you usually get a lot more sediment in the water, and it can be harder to tell if it's cyanobacteria or not. Okay, and then I just wanted to reiterate this point of kind of where do these visual assessments fit in. So once you guys take visual assessments, we will be able to see those on our end as soon as you submit them through the app. We will then look at those, make an assessment, and then if we and Mass DPH, if we think it is cyanobacteria, we'll contact Mass DPH and tell them, hey, we think this is cyanobacteria, and they will have their own team go out and do an assessment. If they think that it is cyanobacteria, or if they think it's no bloom, or there's maybe not enough cyanobacteria in the water to consider it a bloom, we'll keep doing this monitoring cycle. If it is a bloom, they post those on their website for the state. And then they tell the municipalities, they recommend the municipalities issue an advisory. So for the Charles River Lower Basin, they contact DCR because they own the Esplanade, and Cambridge because they are the other side of the river, and that's typically where we see them. And then those entities will issue an official advisory and put up a sign that looks like this at any access point so that people know to be cautious when they're letting their dogs in, not to swim, be cautious for boating and things like that. All right, that is the end, but I'd love to take any questions that we have or go back and yeah, see what you guys think.
I'm not sure that I have questions. This is so exciting that I can just do this while I'm out running.
Yeah, awesome. So I think one thing I'd love to hear from you guys is, like, how do you think this could fit into your kind of regular schedule, or when do you see yourself doing this and where?
So for myself, I do my long runs either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Okay. And I usually start around community rowing and then go up like as far as the View Bridge.
Oh, awesome. That's wonderful.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks so much. I usually go to the Charles River Esplanade. I try and go as much as possible because it's so beautiful there. So I guess I would just, yeah, I guess I'll just notice now. When I go, I'll just know that I can use this app and do this. And I feel like it's really user friendly. Like it doesn't seem that hard.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's really good because I definitely don't have a science background actually, but this seems very doable. So that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the goal of this. So if you guys also are using it and have any suggestions or questions, feel free to contact us and let us know how it's going, and we can always adjust in the future. Yishin or Perry, do you feel like you would be able to use this as part of your routines? Not sure if you guys are there. Okay, no worries. And then the final thing, I was just going to show you kind of what it looks like on our end. So I'll share my screen one more time. So on our end, we can basically then go into this survey in our ArcGIS account, and we get like a map, first of all of the observations that were made. And then we can go through and look at all of the parameters that you put in. So an example from last year, and then we can download these, and we actually share these directly with Department of Public Health, which is helpful. So an example last year of one that was a cyanobacteria bloom. Let's go to September. So you can see, we can see the pictures that are submitted. This is a green tint to the water. It's sometimes hard to see in the water surface pictures, but it also really helps to have notes. So lots of trash, that's also a helpful note. So yeah, we can easily see these. Any other questions or anything? Great. Well, thank you guys all for coming. And as we said, we'll follow up with sending out this presentation that has the link to the waiver form and then all the instructions for downloading the app. And then you guys can get started at volunteering, and our contact information is on that as well. So feel free to reach out to us at any point in time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye.